Hello there. I've decided that I'm probably going to be doing like a series or another playlist on my channel. And what it'll be based on is just, I don't know, random thoughts, uh, things that strike me that I think I want to talk about, that kind of thing. Maybe I'll like title the playlist Let's Talk or something like that. Um, they will mostly be an attempt at encouragement, but it'll just be things that that strike me that I think I want to elaborate on or talk about, and the playlist will be popular or it won't, but it'll typically be some way to encourage, and it'll be intermittent. I mean, it's not going to be every week. I'm not going to be coming out with something like that, but just when the mood strikes me, sort of. And today, and a lot of them are going to be like this. I'm not really even sure what the title is or how to explain what I'm talking about. I'm just going to get on through it and go where it takes me. So when I was a boy, when my parents were young or my grandparents were young, we did not have the internet. Okay, if I needed something, if we needed something, truly needed it, okay, we couldn't hop on Amazon. We couldn't go to our phone or our laptop or our PC or whatnot and get on Amazon and look it up and compare prices and get the best deal and order it and have it sent back out to us in a day or two. It arrived on our doorstep with from UPS or FedEx or some little drone didn't fly onto our porch and drop it off and that kind of thing. There weren't options like there are now. In a lot of ways, I think that made us more self-sufficient than what we normally would be, or and particularly what a lot of times, if you look at society now, what society is today. Sometimes I think when I look around that if we didn't have all this technology, people might starve to death because they don't know, any other way. But when I was young, if we needed something, we only had a few options. One option was, we would go down to the general store or the hardware store or whatever store it was that might have whatever it is that we needed. If we were lucky enough to have that store, in our hometown. I grew up in a town with one stoplight. We didn't have very much. Most of the stores we used to have were closed down. The only thing we really had was a bank, which eventually closed down, a general store, a post office, and we used to have a five and dime and a furniture store, but they closed down. A laundromat. That's about it, And so, we didn't have a hardware store. If we needed anything like that, we had to go out of town or toward the outskirts of town. At one point we had I believe it was a Sears or Montgomery Ward. Okay. And that was it, And so if we needed something, we would have to go to whatever store we thought the item we needed would be and look at what they had. And if we really needed it, okay, we couldn't negotiate, we didn't have a whole lot of options. It was what they had and that was it. Okay? And if it would work and we needed it, then we paid the money. Or we found some way to come up with the money. We scrounged it, we borrowed it, we begged it, we stole it, whatever. If we needed that item, and if they didn't have it, well, then we could order it. And it would take 6 to 8 weeks if you were lucky, depending on when they actually got around to ordering the item. Meanwhile, you paid your money and you waited. Or if we couldn't do that, we would go to the Sears catalog or some other mail order catalog and and you would send a money order and wait 6 or 8 weeks. And if the item came in, because a lot of times you never got anything, you sent it off in the mail, and you didn't have any recourse. If they didn't, send you your item, you were pretty much out of luck. Okay, it ain't like today. You couldn't, a lot of times they just never came in, or when they did come in, the item was a piece of crap and didn't work. So, if you had to do something like that, well, 6 or 8 weeks is a long time to wait for something you had to have. Okay, so what we did usually was we found a way to find something we already had that would work, or that we could alter to make it work, or we scrounged up the parts and materials however we could to make what we wanted, or we found someone that had it and we borrowed it, that kind of deal. And it just seems like to me that we've forgotten that there's another way to do things. There are many, many ways to get something done. And common wisdom today is that there's one way and that's it. And there's not. There's a lot of different ways. It depends on what you got up here and what you've got here, how much heart you got, whether or not you can do what you want to do with what you got. Okay. Some of the examples that I would give is when I first started woodworking. Of course, I'm terminally poor, and I don't mean that I'm really poor, but my income is limited. It's low. And a lot of people's income is like that, okay? When I started woodworking, I would go into woodworking forums and let's just pick something like a chisel, okay? You look at these guys, they got hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars worth of tools. And you'd say to these guys, you'd post and you'd say, I need some good, cheap chisels. And invariably you get somebody come on and say, well, there's no such thing. Or you'd get people that would say, don't waste your money. Buy this chisel instead, $70. All right, Or they'd say, here's some cheap chisels, and the things were $60 or $70 a piece. And you'd say, well, wait a minute, that's not cheap. I can't afford $70 for 4 chisels, which is what I actually need, much less 1 chisel. And they would be like, well, everything else is junk. Well, if you look at some of my woodworking videos, I use some pretty cheap stuff, but I get the job done. Okay, they were looking at it from a different aspect and a different standpoint. But the thing of it is what should have happened. Some of these guys are old. They're a lot older than me, and they went through things like their grandparents went through the Depression and stuff like that, and they had to learn to do with what they had. But now all they do is, throw some money at it. You don't have to do that, okay? If you got it and you want to, fine, but there are other ways to do things. The way in which you get things done can depend more on what you want to do and whether or not you want to succeed than how much money you have to throw at something. Another example would be when I started building guitars, okay? What I would do, I didn't have the money. Some of these guys in the guitar building forums, they got $20,000 and $30,000 worth of machinery and shop tools and a big, huge shop and all kind of stuff. And I'm not knocking them. Some of them, they're building guitars as a profession, and they need all those tools because so that they can do volume and repeatedly the same quality over and over and over again very fast. So I'm not knocking them, but I would come on and I would be in a position where I would be ready to go to the next procedure in building a guitar, but I didn't have the $200 or $300 or $400 tool or piece of equipment. Sometimes they cost more than that to do the job. And so I would come on the forum and I would say, I'm fixing to do such and such procedure and I don't have such and such tool. Is there another way to do it? Can I do it cheaper? And what you get is people that say, well, just buy the tool or buy the gear, buy the equipment. You won't be sorry, you know. Well, that's not an option for me. And I would tell them that. And then you'd get a guy that would come on over and over. I would get this. And the guy would be so full of himself. Well, if you can't afford that, then maybe you ought to try something else and not do guitar building. Dude, I didn't ask you to judge my life, okay, or tell me what I'm capable of doing. Okay, I just asked for some advice. I didn't ask for somebody to come in there and say, if you're not as rich as I am, if you don't have the money I have, if you don't have the gear that I have, if you're not willing to invest this amount of money, X amount of dollars, you know what? I didn't ask for all that, okay? There are more things in this universe than are dreamt of by most people's philosophies. Yeah, that's a screwed up version of Shakespeare, okay? But the point of it is look, you can do whatever you want to do if you want to do it bad enough. If you, in this day and age, the internet is a huge resource. If I want to learn to do anything, I can look on YouTube and find instruction. The thing about it is when you start looking at how to do something and you run across particularly a monetary block where it's like you don't have the money to do that. But it could be other reasons. You could have a disability. It could be all kinds of reasons, okay? What I did with guitar building was I looked at the process that people were using with the expensive tools and stuff like that. And I said, well, they're actually doing this. The machine is doing it, but this is what I've got to do this process. So how do I do that with a hand tool or with the power tools that I have? How do I accomplish this in a different way? And what I'm trying to say to you is that there's not just one way to do things. You can do what you want to do if you want to do it bad enough. You can learn to do anything you want to do if you'll use this, okay? We've forgotten how to use this, okay? And one of the things that I found like on straight razor honing or on shaving, people want you to just tell them exactly how it's done. And then they can follow some kind of formula that you gave them, and boom, I'm a master honer. Or, well, first of all, I'm not a master honer. Let's get that out of the way first. And secondly, you see guys all the time, well, you do 20 laps on this stone and 15 on that stone. That ain't the way it works. Sorry. If you want to learn it, you're going to have to put the time in to figure it out. You can read books and talk to people and get advice till you're blue in the face, but until you actually do it, you're not ever really going to truly learn it. And it's the same thing like, if you've come against a blockage where you're trying to learn something or trying to do something and something stands in your way. It's up to you to figure out how to get around that, how to work through that. And what I'm trying to say to you is you can. Don't let anybody tell you you cannot. All right? If you have the heart, the desire, and the ingenuity, and you say, well, I'm not I don't have very much ingenuity. Well, you can learn that too, okay? On some of my builds, like I'm coming up on my guitar build, on my woodworking channel, I got to do a dovetail neck joint. All right. Well, I haven't done any work on that acoustic guitar for at least a month, probably longer. I switched to working on an electric because I've got two builds going at the same time. But I switched to that because I need to stop and think really hard before I try to cut that dovetail joint, because I've never done it before. And it's critical. If I mess it up, then I just will chunk the whole thing in the trash. Alright? So I stopped. And I'm thinking long and hard before I actually go and do. Before I take a saw and put it to that wood, I'm going to think really, really hard. Because if you look, you see a lot of guys that, well, I do a traditional dovetail joint. What they've got is they've got a template and a router bit that cuts a dovetail angle. Okay? And they put the guitar in a vise made for it, with it standing up in a jig, and that's what they're doing, is they're running that router. They're not actually cutting that joint. The machine's doing it, and they do it does a perfect job every time, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm trying to do it by hand. Okay? So I have to step back. That's what I'm trying to say is, look, if you want to learn something, if you want to do something, sometimes if you'll just step back and step out of, this sounds funny, but the modern way, the accepted norms of way of looking at something, and try to come at it from another point of view, and say to yourself, with what I know, with what information is available to me, with what I have on hand or what I can afford to get, how do I do this thing? Okay? We really need, as a country, to get back to kind of a self-sufficiency, a stick-to-itiveness, a way of looking at things from a different point of view. That's where innovation comes in a big way, is that somebody looked at something differently. So try to look at things differently, and don't give up. Whatever it is that you're trying to learn, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. You know what, Thomas Edison, I forget how many hundreds of times he said, people said that he failed. And I know this is an old cliche now that everybody uses, but it's absolutely true. But I forget how many times people say how many hundreds of times, 200 or 300 times, that he said he failed, or that people said he failed at making a light bulb. Edison said, look, I didn't fail 200 something times or 300 times. I found that many times that don't work. And what he did was he just kept at it until he succeeded. And one of the things that I hope to impart is that the only way that you fail is if you give up. Okay? The only limits are the ones you set in your own mind. Okay? Don't let other people limit you, and don't limit yourself. Just keep plugging away. If you keep at something long enough, you can succeed. Alright. Thanks for watching. Bless you. Later.